everybody, and welcome to Libromancy, a podcast about the magic of books. I'm Josh, and today I'm going to be talking about Traitor's Blade, the first book in the Greatcoats series by Sebastien De Castell. Now, I'm going to try and keep it a little bit non-spoiler here, and just go through the first couple things that I like to think about. First off, I love this book. It is an amazingly fun read. It has a little bit of depth to it, and it not just a little bit, it's got more than just a little bit of depth to it, but it's beautiful. It's very well written. This is my second time through it, and I loved it even more than the first. In fact, every time as I was reading it, every few minutes I'd be like, man, how did I miss this the first time I was reading this? How did I miss this the first time I was reading it? Am I just blind when I was reading this book the first time? I must have been. So, just in a non-spoilery kind of way, this book is like a fantasy Three Musketeers, or a more fantasy Three Musketeers, because the Three Musketeers, they're not really fantasy, but you could think about them that way. So, I love it. There are three people, our main characters, Falcio, Kest, and Brasti, looking for the king's chateaux, or jewels, trying to figure out what that is. It was his last order. They wear these beautiful big coats that have, secret pockets all over the place. They can fight hand to hand with them, put cuffs, put brass knuckles on, kind of a thing. Very cool. Just these characters are beautiful. They all kind of have their own voice and their own feeling, and you can tell which one is who. Just by their actions, you would know. Now, this world is amazing, beautiful. It feels, parts of it are beautiful. It feels real. It feels lived in. It is great. So, see, the plot is a good plot. I would hesitate to say this is like a strictly plot-based book, because not so much of the book, but there is so much character development among all the characters, even the characters that you don't think really should get any character moment. So that's, just great. And I just could not put this book down after I started reading it. I was reading it, and after about the 20-ish, 25%-ish mark, it took me a little bit to get just back into it, but I attribute that more to work and life than the book itself. So I just could not put it down after that mark, though. So I read as much as I could and as fast as I could, and I just kept going. So let's get into some spoilers here, and let's just talk about it. So the Three Musketeers are Falcio, Kest, and Brasti. Kest is the best with the sword. He's kind of got this dry personality, although it's kind of funny. This is one of my only small grievances with this story, is that occasionally Falcio would have this moment of inspiration, and then it would be taken away from him, not by somebody else proclaiming it first, but he would be literally kind of forced to forget it. Namely with the tailor, where he's kind of figuring the stuff out about Aline, and then she's like, oh no, you're a little early for that, and makes him forget it. And I was like, I don't necessarily get this, but Kest knew from childhood almost that he was going to become the best with the sword and fight the saint. Saint something whose sword cuts water. Don't remember the name right now, sorry. But that was just interesting that he kind of had that much foresight, or foreknowledge, but Falcio, who's our main character that we're following, wasn't allowed it. So, just to give a general plot, Falcio and his crew, working for a caravaner, trying to bring the Greatcoats back, because the Greatcoats have been technically disbanded or reviled, because the king was murdered a couple years ago, and they are working with the caravaner to bring back to get hired as guards, and then they can start building up their reputation again. He's murdered, so they get roped into working for another caravan on their way out. They realize that this caravan leader is going to put all of the dukes who murdered the king, they are going to kind of cement their power. And while doing this, they travel through a city, the Rock. I really wish I had written down the name of the Rock City, but there's a great scene. It was one of my favorites where, well, we'll get to that in just a second. I'm sorry. So they get to the city. They find out that it's the Blood Week, which means that basically the only rule is whatever you keep, you own at the end of the week. So murder's allowed, anything's allowed. And they are getting ready to kill this merchant family, or this lower noble family. One of the girls in the noble family survives. Falcio's like, I'm going to save this girl because I couldn't save those others because I should have, and it was dishonorable of me not to. He kind of leaves. He stays, saves the girl, presents her at the Rock. Then they leave. They are chased. He gets captured. They leave. They escape and leave again. And then they kind of present and have this final little battle, not a little battle, big battle between some Greatcoats, new and old, and a ducal army. So I loved it. Now let's rewind a little bit, and go back to the scene where they go to the Rock. And the Greatcoats are these traveling magisters who answer to no one but the king, and they are basically traveling judges. So they go, they hear the words of the complaints of the common folk, and they answer it where a local judge or jury has failed, or, just like the Duke was like, oh, I'm just going to kill this peasant because he was annoying and not pay the family or restitute anything. And then the Greatcoat would go in and solve that problem, whether through murder or through jury and restitution. Usually, violence is their last answer, but he has presented Aline, the girl he is taking care of, at the Rock, and said that, hey, she made it, and the Duke there is saying, no, I'm going to make Blood Week one more day, and you're going to kill her, and you're not going to make it, and it's wrong. And this very impassioned scene where Falcio's like, the Blood Week isn't even from you guys, it's from the East where he brought it from. He thinks it makes you better, but it makes you weak, and do you feel stronger because of the Blood Week? And it's like, when there were invaders to the west, what did what happened? They met the Rock. And when there were invaders from the north, what happened? They met the Rock and they couldn't break the Rock. And we held out and, and then he just keeps going. It's like, everywhere else in the country that I go, a week is 7 days. And the Blood Week already lasts for 9. How are you going to feel when the Blood Week lasts all year around? And it was intense. It was so good. And then he calls... he spread some little bit of gold around. He's like, I need to call 12 people to be my jurors, people who will remember my verdict and, pass it on and keep it alive in your memory. Just so amazing. It's an amazing scene in this book. Now, if I wanted to talk about my favorite scene in this book, not my favorite scene, this is one of my favorite tropes. And it's not like a weird one, but it's the trope of the really righteous, powerful anger where, they know what they're doing is right, but they are super angry about it, and they are basically an unstoppable force on the way to their destination. Whether they reach their destination or are persuaded a different way by something else is, that's near the end of it. But so when Falcio, as a young man, is married to Aline, a different Aline, and his wife goes with the king and the Duke because they require it, and they, for naughty stuff, and they're just horrible people. And then he finds her dead, and he basically just was like, I was in a haze, I walked, I fell asleep, I slept. Somebody must have fed me because he didn't starve to death on my way there, but I walked with this bloody single-minded purpose that I'm going to get in and kill the king, and just, he is an unstoppable force until he meets with King Palus, who is the king's son, and not even a healthy person. He's just a weak person, and then they start the Greatcoats together. So that's one of my favorite tropes in all the genres, is just this powerful, righteous anger. It's so much fun. Now, let's talk again a little bit more. The person they're riding in their caravan with is Valiana, and she is the fake daughter of the Duchess of Hervor, and she turns out is not actually her daughter, but she has been raised to believe she was her daughter so that she could pass all the tests in order to cement the Duchess's daughter's claim as a new queen, in order to give the dukes and the duchesses absolute power to prevent another king from ever coming up. Now, Valiana is obviously devastated, and she ends up joining the Greatcoats at the very end. It was good. I love it that she's been lost all of her purpose. She has lost, everything she thought. She wanted to be a good ruler, even if she didn't really know anything or know enough. And she joins, and then they off to fight, and she does her best, and she promises that she will protect Aline. Uses the same oath that Falcio uses when he swears his first oath to King Palus. Now, this book has a lot of flashbacks, and I thought they were very well placed and very well written. They enhance the story, they keep it moving forward, but they help you kind of reel back a little bit of that tension that you're feeling in the main story. So, I really like all the flashbacks that we see with King Palus, and with the just following Falcio and learning everything we learn about the leading up to the execution of the king and the disbanding of the Greatcoats. Now, I just forgot this one thing. This is one other little thing that I felt like was just very little nitpick, is that sometimes the girl Aline sounded like she actually knew who her real father was. Again, this is the spoiler section, so if you haven't read, I would stop. But Aline is the daughter of King Palus, that he was courting the lower nobles, basically meaning he was running around and doing the deed with a bunch of lower nobles so that his bloodline would never run out, and that they could have a true king or queen on the throne that was not a puppet to the dukes and duchesses. So the jewels, or the king's jewels, are his kids. They finally find that out, but a lot of times Aline is like, don't you know anything? But I can't tell you. It's very coy that she sounds like she knows something about her parentage that Falcio is missing out on, and then it turns out she doesn't know anything at the end when it's actually revealed to her. So that is, that's another just minor nitpick. Now, the sword fighting. I thought the sword fighting was just magnificently written. It's always told from Falcio. He's always talking, explaining it to you, and it never really felt out of place to me while I was reading it. But I could see how me saying it would make you sound like, oh, maybe doesn't sound good, but it actually does work really well in the story itself. I love that he talks about the way they do it and the practicing they've done. It really makes it all believable, and I love just listening to him kind of narrate the sword fight as it's happening to you, to the reader, and I really enjoyed that part. Now, I'm going to give a couple more of my great scenes. Okay, sorry, one more thing before I go on to all of my favorite scenes. So, the jailer scene, when Falcio has been kidnapped by the Duchess of Hervor, and he's being tortured, and he's like, oh, well, we know how to interrogate torture. You just talk, and you just tell them everything, whether they want to hear it or not. And he's like, I usually start with the first laws. And so he repeats all the laws of the land. That the man is free, that a man has a right to live. And he goes on, and he sings them, and he talks to him, and the jailer is listening, and he starts hearing him, and he kind of listens. And then he is being tortured some more, and they take him to a fey horse, which is kind of just a mystical wild horse, and a magical mystical wild horse. There is magic in the book, although it's not from any of our main characters. So it's more of just a soft kind of in the background thing. So, but that's not bad. It does not deter from the story at all. So he meets this horse, and this horse has been brutalized and tortured by the Duchess of Hervor to be just a killing machine, trying to make it into a war machine. And he is just screaming at this horse, no, don't kill Aline. She's of your herd. We're safe. We're not going to try and kill you. And the horse chooses not to kill Aline and protects her, a little bit. And then the next day, the jailer comes in and he's like, I'm going to be a man. Like, that horse, he could choose. Why can't I choose? Like, I am not worse than a horse. I am a human. And, oh my gosh, just like his character that, like, he's got very little, like, character work done on him. But, like, it is explained, like, we could see it. Like, oh yeah, the first day he just, beat him up. And the next day he's kind of humming the tunes that Faucio was singing. The next day, he's doing more and they talk a little bit. And then, yeah, it's just so fun. It's so great. And I love that whole scene. I already talked about they met the Rock and no man breaks the Rock scene, but man, you just get goosebumps when you're reading, and I got goosebumps thinking about it. It is amazing. Now, seeing all the new Greatcoats appear and come riding out was awesome. Like, you just are like, how are they going to fight this army? They've only got this many people. And then all the Greatcoats appear, and it's like, bam, we're here for you. We're here to help. And I love them. The tailor, I love the character as a tailor until like 3/4 to 5/6 of the way through the book. And this is one of those things that, like, I don't know how I missed it the first time I read it, because it's very obvious and made very plain that she is the King Palis's mom. And I just spaced that or forgot about it the last time I read it. And that's the only thing I really dislike. I dislike that she is his mom. I feel like it really undercuts the mystery and the threads that she's weaving. But I love her as a character, that she's always like, I go where I'm needed. I am a good tailor. I am the only tailor. I know how to weave the threads, and I can follow the threads, and I can see your thread, and this is where they're going, and I'm going to meet you here, just her planning and her mysticalness, and that she wove these greatcoats, and, they've never been able to find all the secret pockets that it'll hold, and all this mystical powers and this foresight, and that she has, it appears in the beginning that she has this grand goal of bringing back the Greatcoats and, in making the world better and blah. But then you kind of learn it's just like, oh, it's just revenge for the king, which is like, that's fine because it was obviously your son. But I felt it cheapened / worsened her just a little bit. Now, did I still love her? Yes. That is not an issue at all. I also love the fight with Cunin, who is another Greatcoat, and he challenges Faucio to a duel, or Faucio challenges him. They do a little bit, and then they back off. And Alita's like, it's almost sounded like they were questioning each other through that duel. And they're like, no, that's crazy. Like, if he was, what would he be doing? What would he have said? And he's like, well, it sounded like he said, like, he was just asking simple questions like yes and no's, and, did you do this? And what about this? And then it got really complicated, and I couldn't follow it anymore. And they're like, no, that's crazy talk. You're young, you're seeing things. Like, go back to bed, go hang out over here. And then they turn back to each other like, okay, what did he say? And he's like, well, this is what he said. But you guys know the sword fighting language is not that complex. It's not that precise. So we have to kind of go with a lot of other things. So I love that. That was just a fun little thing to see happen right there. And I think I've really talked about everything that I really, really loved about this book. But there is so much fun to be had in this book. It is a great tale of camaraderie and friendship. Oh, of course, how could I forget one of the funniest scenes? Kest, the best with the sword, is getting ready to fight the saint whose sword cuts like water. And, he's like, I'm going to die. I can't even see him swing his sword. And, like, good luck. I'm going to try and hold him off as fast as possible. And they leave, and then they see somebody wearing Kest's greatcoat come up. And they think it's the saint because he was like, I want your greatcoat when you're dead, and you'll be dead, and so you won't care. And they're like, okay. And so Faucio's like, well, if Kest couldn't see his sword, I'm not going to be able to see his sword. So I'm just going to close my eyes and like wait for him to get a little closer, and then I'm going to unleash the best swing I can ever do, and just hope. And then he's getting ready, and Kest is like, that's the weirdest fighting stance I've ever seen, keeping your eyes closed. And yeah, he beat the saint, and he's like, yeah, it turns out Saint is just a guy, just a guy who's really good at something, and it was just so good and fun, and I loved it. So again, I know I've said it a couple times, but I'm just going to keep saying it. I I really love the Traitor's Blade book. I am so excited to actually read past it this time. I don't remember why I didn't read them before. I think I just was reading something else, and the other one kind of took precedence, but super excited to be finishing this out, and that is going to wrap up my discussion of Traitor's Blade, the first book in the Greatcoats series by Sebastien De Castell. Thanks for listening, everybody, and thanks to David Hillowitz for the intro and outro music. Please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. It really helps me out. If you have any questions or comments, you can send those to libromancypod@gmail.com. So, thanks for that. And remember to search for the magic of books.